Kind Earth Tech.
A taste of the future.
Justyna has been kind enough to prepare a presentation for us around what is currently the legislation around taste. So I would like to give the floor to Justyna, and please educate us about what is possible these days around taste in Europe and what is not. So thank you for being here, Justyna.
Thank you, Ira, for the introduction and very nice words. Hello, everyone. I'm Justyna from Pen Tec Consulting, and I will be presenting today on taste and how it's regulated, mainly in the EU, but I'll also touch on the US. So we all know that taste is one of the challenges when creating alternative protein. And in many cases, manufacturers may want to use flavors, natural or others, to make the product more appealing to the consumer. This can be done either to add spice and flavor, or mask some off tastes, balance the flavors, or other. So what do you need to be aware of when choosing a flavor for your product, and starting with the EU? Like everything in the EU, flavors are also regulated. The entities involved here are the European Commission, the European Food Safety Authority, and the EU member state authorities. All flavors used in the EU must have a legal status, but not all of them have to be authorized. This is covered by Regulation 1334 from 2008, which not only covers the legal basis of flavorings, but also includes a union list of flavors that are allowed to be used in food, and which flavors are not allowed, and what are the restrictions. There's also a database for flavorings published by the European Commission, but well, the union list is more reliable. If a flavor is not listed in the union list, it may need to be authorized. This is done under Regulation 1331 from 2008 as well. What is important to know, and may be relevant for our alternative proteins, is that smoke flavors are covered by a separate legislation. So this would be Regulation 2065 from 2003 and 1321 from 2013. And finally, other regulations also might apply, like the GMO regulation, depending on how your flavor was produced and whether there is any recombinant DNA or genetically modified organism present in the final flavor. What exactly are flavorings? So these are generally products that are added to food to affect the taste or odor of food, and not just the ones that add flavor, but also substances such as flavor precursors. It's important to note that substances that have only sweet, salty, or sour taste are not considered flavorings. They would be considered food ingredients. An interesting example here is stevia, where a compound called Reb A is classified both as a flavor due to its flavor modifying properties and as a sweetener. The regulation distinguishes between flavoring substances and preparations, with the first being highly purified substances with flavoring properties, which are usually at least 95% pure, unless specified otherwise. Flavor preparations, on the other hand, are more complex products, which are derived from traditional food preparation processes. As mentioned before, an application may need to undergo official assessment, and an application may need to be filed. And here is a list of the types of flavors that will need to go undergo an official assessment. A simplified rule is that those flavors that are derived from food ingredients will not have to undergo an official assessment. But of course, there are also some other provisions that need to be met. And the key rules being that all flavors have to be safe for the consumer and not mislead them. So in summary, the EU, there is a large number of flavors that are already authorized or that you are able to use legally in the European Union. Regulation 1334 provides a union list together with restrictions on on specific conditions of use and specific substances. There is a separate legislation for smoke flavors. And if a substance is not on the union list or the source material is different than the one originally used in the application, a new application might need to be filed. And finally, an important point to note is that when selling your product, all the flavors must be declared on the label of your product. So moving briefly to the US, there are 3 groups of flavor-related substances here, which are regulated by the US FDA. These are flavoring substances, flavorings with modifying properties, and flavor adjuvants. Another term that's commonly used is compound flavors, which is a mix of usually of flavors and adjuvants. So if the flavoring doesn't have a history of use in the US, well, if the flavoring doesn't have a history of use before 1994, you will need to submit an application or prepare an application. There are 2 routes to bring a flavor on the market. One is a food additive petition, and the other one is generally recognized as safe application, which is also called GRAS in short. The difference between the 2 routes is the amount of data available in the public domain. If there is sufficient information to justify the safety of the flavor, a GRAS can be prepared. But if it's a completely new substance, you might need to consider a food additive petition. Most companies prefer to follow the GRAS route, although the weight of evidence is similar here. The route is quicker, and one could argue that it's also easier. And here is why. So there are 3 different ways to approach a GRAS. One can be preparing a self-affirmed GRAS, which is basically compiling information on the safety of the substance and then presenting it to an expert panel for their evaluation. And this type of GRAS is not evaluated by the FDA. Alternatively, one can decide to submit a notification to the FDA, which will then issue a no questions letter upon reaching an agreement on the safety of the flavor. Finally, especially for flavors, a GRAS can also be submitted to FEMA, the Flavor Extract Manufacturers Association. They have their own panel. They have their own panel and broad experience in evaluating in evaluating flavors. They also, on their website, FEMA also has a database or library of flavors which have achieved GRAS status, which can be very helpful to know what can be added to your food. So to summarize, the US now, most flavors in the US are evaluated by the GRAS procedure. GRAS can be self-affirmed, notified to the FDA, or notified to FEMA. GRAS, or food additive petition, status is specific to the substance, to the technical effect, to the food category, and to the use level, which means that if there is a GRAS notice for use in one food category, and you want to use it in a different food category, you will need to file an extension of this GRAS. And finally, similarly to the EU, flavors must be declared on the label. This is it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy if you join me in the Q&A session.